In today's technique analysis video, we're going to be taking a look at Klokov from Russia. Absolutely incredible Olympic weightlifter. Was probably one of the most famous lifters in 2012, 2018, and then I think the World Championships in Paris. Don't quote me on the date, but I think he won that one. Absolutely amazing. I used to have a poster of him on my gym, in my wall when I was growing up. The video that we're actually looking at here was from World Championships in Houston in 2015. I was actually lucky enough to compete in this competition myself, and I remember seeing this. Now, this was after Klokov had actually retired, and he jumped into the training hall just to knock out a bit of training with a few of the guys in there, and he worked up to 200 kilo hang snatch. Now, Klokov used to put this type of training in a lot for himself, where he'd lift the bar up, pause at kind of just above knee high, and then just absolutely flop like a salmon underneath it into his snatch. Now, there's a couple of key things that I want to kind of look at this with you guys on, because I would not say it's the most clinical technique or the most common seen technique used. You'll notice how Klokov in his setup position, right, when he gets set here, he has his feet obscenely close to the point where his heels are almost touching. Now, one of the reasons why I think Klokov did this initially in his setup for his snatches is because he has quite long proportioned legs, and it allows him, like you can see from this initial phase from the lift, to use his legs, one, which is great in the first phase of the lift, but also to clear the knees when he initiates the movement. But one thing that you'll notice once he gets to his above knee height position is he's very, very heavily loaded in the heel and in his posterior chain. So his back, his glutes, and his hamstrings taking a hell of a lot of the load there in this position. What you'll also notice in terms of his back, he's still maintaining a nice neutral position with his trunk. However, he's very much shoulders heavily over the bar in this position. Naturally, from this position, it's quite difficult for you to be able to use your legs proportionally as much as your back from this position. From here, difficult to use the legs from this position. So what he's got to do in order to be able to utilize the legs is kind of almost scoop his knees underneath the bar, which you'll see start to happen here before he initiates the movement. This kind of puts him back into a normal position that you'd kind of see as the bar's coming past the knee. You see leg bend, you see bar touching the thigh, you see shoulders over the bar. But naturally what will happen when we're coming from this position is that we're probably going to see at the top, the shoulders throw back heavily. So what I always say, right, is that whatever position you kind of make here with your torso, you'll kind of emulate at the top in terms of in the other direction. So you can see the shoulders, let me slow this down, go back heavily and almost mimics the complete opposite of the top. One of the issues with this is going to be consistency if you're throwing back so heavily with the shoulders at the top of the lift. In order to be in the perfect position to be able to catch the bar there, like Klokov is, regularly. He does this very well, but one of the things I want you to notice, normally what happens for a lot of people when they throw the shoulders back at the top of the lift, okay, is the bar kind of swings out in this direction. But what you'll notice is even though Klokov's letting his shoulders move back here in his top position, the trajectory of the bar is still vertical. Now, he doesn't get loads of height on it, but he takes advantage of the fact that because he's quite tall and he's got long levers, that when he stands up straight, even with the bar, it's already at a fairly good height before he moves underneath it, which means that when he goes into receiving position with his unreal mobility, he gets away with it, okay? One thing that you'll notice as well in his catch position is his knees collapse in quite heavily, and you'll also notice how there's a little bit of rounding here in the back, in the lowest phase. Again, most of us would be trying to maintain a neutral torso position or angle with the spine in this lowest point. However, Klokov's done what is almost like a butt wink in his bottom position to the point where his bum's almost touching the floor. Like I said, this is an absolutely obscene snatch and incredible, but it's not utilizing what we normally see as a technique for this kind of lift. So I think it's kind of cool to break it down. It's different. Like I said, I don't want to comment too much on it because he's lifting an obscene weight and he's obviously doing it very well. It's just very different from what you'd normally see. But that's kind of the key things that I take away from this in terms of Klokov's technique. Very strong posterior chain, making the most of his long levers, and does very well to stay consistent considering he's throwing his shoulders back so heavily into his receiving position. Gets away with it a lot of the time because he has very good mobility and obviously a lot of strength in and around his joints to be able to load 200 kilos overhead and not really crumble much after the catch. So it was a very famous lift, amazing to see, and I'm glad to see Klokov still knocking about now, doing a little bit of CrossFit. Hope you guys enjoyed that analysis. Nice to look at an absolute ambassador for the sport of weightlifting, if you like, in terms of making it mainstream, making it popular in the early days when CrossFit was coming around, and a very unusual technique to kind of analyze. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you've got questions, comments, and even your thoughts on this technique would be awesome to hear. Stick it in the comments below.